subscribing and leaving comments.
Our next speaker, I'm going to have to introduce him rather briefly because our timing is, we're going to go a little bit over noon today. Next one is Danny Perez from Norwalk, California. He's been interested in monsters for, looks like 17 years it would amount to here, and has been corresponding with other Bigfoot investigators for a long time, and is now issuing a newsletter, and he has also produced a book, the Bigfoot Directory, a comprehensive bibliography on the subject, and that's quite impressive. I think we'll just have to turn it over to Danny Perez and see what he can do with what might be called the general theme, Sasquatch, the extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Okay, Danny.
Briefly, the areas of discussion will be Happy Camp, Lion Pump, Truckee, Buena Park, Plymouth, California, and a few things above and beyond that. So that's what that map is there for. Over here, on taped interview, we have myself, Pavlovich, Clayton Paulson, Leonard Williams, Sergeant Joe Mosley, a friend of Mosley, Charlie McCoy, Bill Davis, this is Lori Robertson. As we go through the tape, I'll probably point to that person talking so you know who's speaking. And it's imperative that we all be quiet. I will be running a 16mm movie projector, film some tracks, a slide, and then also another 8mm movie projector. So we're going to be jumping all around, so bear with me. How many people here believe there are Sasquatch? First of all, can you hear me? Everything okay?
You could speak louder, Danny. It would be appreciated.
How many people here believe there are Sasquatches living in the woods? Let's have a hand count. Okay. Put your hands down. This subject is not about belief, contrary to popular opinion. It doesn't matter what you believe. To give you an example, you may believe or disbelieve I have a dollar bill in my pocket. But does your belief influence the outcome of whether I have a dollar bill in my pocket? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I do have a dollar bill in my pocket. It measures about 6 inches in length. I want you to remember that, as it'll be used later in our discussion. Okay, where am I? Since my inception into this field, the word believe has both amused and irritated me. One only has to look at newspaper headlines to see that so-and-so believes in the abominable snowman, as if it really matters or makes a difference. You can write or lecture about your beliefs with regard to the Sasquatch, and quite probably you will influence the minds of those who read and listen. But you will not change what the reality of the situation is. It is either they are there or they are not there, in spite of what you believe. It is quite probable that Sasquatches inhabit the remote boondocks of North America, but we do not know this in fact. Let's have our first slide, please. Let's go back in time 31 years. That was 1958. Herb Elliott set a new world record for the mile run. Eisenhower was the president of the United States. The Soviet satellite, Sputnik 3, went around the world. The USS Nautilus made the first underwater crossing of the North Pole, and mountaineer Ed Hillary was headed for the opposite pole. That same year, construction workers were building a new road in the extreme northwest portion of California up to the Oregon border. That road was pushed, say, some 20 miles into basically uninhabited, wild, closed canopy forest. Then things begin to happen. Around the construction equipment, mysterious five-toed, basically man-like tracks begin to appear. Their size was enormous, a good 16 inches in length. News of these strange tracks hit the wire services, and Bigfoot was born. Many of the pioneer Bigfoot hunters vowed that they would collect the tracked hunter within months, maybe a year at most. Well, 31 years has passed, and the track maker has yet to be collected. Had two of the investigators knew then they would still be looking for Sasquatches today, it is quite likely they would have never taken up the hunt. Lights, please. In their lives, I'm certain there are sleepless nights where they openly wonder if these things are real. But in spite of wonderment about the problem, they continue to push ahead with investigation and research. In spite of what you may think, they are not the best of friends, but both are here today, seated in the same building. The last time they met face-to-face was in 1978. If I may have the pleasure of introducing them, I would like them to stand. Both live in Canada. One is named Rene Dahinden. The other is John Green. But getting back to 1958, it was at that time we discovered that an expert out of his own field is just another amateur. Back then, the scientific community, specifically anthropologists, wrote off the whole Sasquatch episodes as silly Indian legends. Unqualified statements ran rampant in the field, but the general consensus seemed to be that the days of giants were over. Yet, in spite of what anyone said, the reports continued to be logged, and as years steadily progressed, there came a willingness to at least consider Sasquatches as unclassified primates. That willingness to seriously consider the problem is exemplified by the fact that this Sasquatch Symposium is actually happening. And better yet, it is happening at the university level and hosted by the Department of Anthropology here at Washington State University. To some, these facts aren't impressive at all, but you must realize that a conference of this caliber would have been unheard of 31 years ago. In that respect, we have made great strides toward an eventual solution to the Sasquatch problem. Let's see. Next slide, please. This is Oliver. He is our first extraordinary claim. In 1976, this 4'6", 135-pound creature captured headlines. You might even think of him as a modern-day version of Jacko, the so-called juvenile Bigfoot captured around Yale, British Columbia, over 100 years ago. Oliver, too, was immediately billed as a young Bigfoot, But sadly enough, the claim fell to pieces upon inspection of his feet. Oliver is characterized by an opposable big toe. This, of course, leaves him out of the Bigfoot picture, which have feet more or less like ours. Oliver was brought into the United States from the Congo jungles of Africa and subsequently purchased for an alleged $8,000 by New York attorney Michael Miller. I can still remember the excitement amongst the Bigfoot fraternity that Oliver was a Bigfoot in the U. Historically speaking, Oliver is important as he is just another example of an unfounded, extraordinary claim for the existence of Sasquatches. To close the Oliver file once and for all, he will be remembered as extraordinary proof of being what he really is, a chimpanzee with chromosome derangement. At this point, lights slide off. The 8mm movie film of Oliver, which I want to project on that screen, doesn't have the right light intensity. I'm going to project it on this screen right above the head of Michael Dennett. And if we could kill the lights again, we can take a look. Let's see. What do we got here? This is the little chimpanzee in Colton, California, about 1979. I think it's clearly obvious that he is and never will be what they claim he was at one time, Sasquatch. Years ago, between Los Angeles and San Diego, California, in a town called Hemet, sighting and footprint finds of you know what were brought to my attention courtesy of Bigfoot researcher Peter Gatella. It took me close to a dozen trips to the area and personal observation of foot tracks that measured 17 inches of length, about 7 inches across the ball, and 5 inches at the heel to convince me fully that at the time there were at least one, possibly two Sasquatches living around Hemet. One of the involved residents was Mrs. June Putnam. This is her recollection of things in general. She writes, about 2 years ago, 1978, we were aware of uneasiness and a sense of being watched. Our horses and other animals were restless without apparent reason. feeling was strong enough that we left the light on in the barn and always carried a rifle. In one instance, 2 junior high school boys were walking at night only to hear something moving about in the bush. Stepping into the bush, they observed, and I quote Mrs. June Putnam again, a 12-foot creature in silhouette with broad, straight shoulders and a pointed or bullet-shaped head. It was reported the boys chucked a rock at the thing, and the creature took off at, quote, indescribable speed. So much for that. Buena Park, California is about 10 miles away from where I live in Norwalk. Of all places, I would suspect this place last for Bigfoot reports to emerge from. Yet this was exactly what happened on May 10, 1982. I think anyone with an ounce of brain would immediately develop a prejudiced opinion against the case because it allegedly occurred in a highly populated suburban area of Los Angeles, within what we collectively call the city, not the outskirts. Naturally, the newspaper and television news got wind of the report, and the so-called police of Buena Park was immediately dubbed Buenafoot. As close as the report occurred to where I live, I can remember it taking about 3-4 days to get to the incident location. Upon arrival, there were people milling about everywhere. One of the so-called witnesses was also present. His name was Benny Hensley. He claims that about 9:30 p.m., May 10, 1982, he, his brother, and a friend named Chris Bennett were hanging around the chain link fence behind their apartment complex and spotted an 8-foot-tall, smelly, hairy animal walk down the Coyote Creek flood control channel behind where they lived. My initial impression after hearing the boy's story was that he made the whole thing up, but it was something I could not prove. It took about 24 trips down to the sighting location and conferring with area residents to finally satisfy myself that nothing ever happened on May 10, 1982, and subsequent monster reports from the area were also bogus. One of the things that amused me about the case was that the other Bigfoot investigators who checked out the sighting location and circumstances surrounding it immediately became experts about the case. Yet few people realized that an hour before the sighting occurred, there was some type of ruckus about in this area in which bottles were thrown at police squad cars. So when the call came in to the Buena Park Police Department that someone had sighted a monster in the vicinity, their initial reaction was that it was some type of ploy to draw the police back into the area. After 1 hour, however, the police did investigate, only to find no tracks at the alleged sighting location and no foul odors as reported, even though apartment manager Frank Missinelli claimed, quote, it smelled like hell, worse than a sewer. It was the same bad odor that 28-year-old Pat Lindquist didn't smell around Mission, British Columbia in 1977. Yet he reported the smell like this, quote, the first thing I noticed was the smell, a horrible smell like very rotten meat. It turns out that the Mission, British Columbia Bigfoot sighting was also a prank. So one is left to wonder if these two individuals really smelled anything at all. Getting back to Buena Park, another explanation for the Buenafoot was that it was a hobo, but that turned out to be a phony theory, when the transient height was far less than what was reported. It was also noted that 2 days after the initial sighting, 4 girls from nearby Charles McComber Junior High School claimed to have seen Buenafoot stick its head out of a storm drain as they watched from the school grounds during their lunch break. My investigation revealed that the best and only place to view the storm drain was at any spot by the chain link fence that bordered the school. Curiously, however, at any spot by the chain link fence, you cannot see the storm drain. So I don't lend any credence to that multiple witness sighting. A plaster of Paris handprint was collected about 150 yards in the storm drain by fellow investigators Tom Mazzilla and Dennis Rummeter. I have no doubts they found a track of some sort, but upon personal inspection of the original casting, one is forced to conclude that the print could literally be anything, even the track planted by the three boys who claim to have seen the thing. It is also to go on record that the handprint find came 2 days after the initial sighting, by which time police officials cast doubt on the original story because of lack of evidence. It would not surprise me the least bit that within those 2 days, the boys thought it best to leave some physical trace behind. And this is exactly what I suspect, that the handprint was put there by the boys. The closing footnote is this. If it takes 24 trips or more to draw any type of conclusion about a Bigfoot report, then you can assure yourself that you take stock in your own investigations rather than what some sensationalistic press might have to write, or ludicrous opinions coming from people who have never visited the sighting location. Could I get the lights off and show my first slide? What the hell? Slide. I don't think you need to open that up. Give it a switch to do. I've got the switch here. Oh, give it a try. We just need the light on. Okay. This is our next concern. This is, well, you can see it here. You can see the approximate location in the United States, the approximate location in California, and specifically on the topographical map of this next case I wish to discuss. By far the most intriguing case I've ever investigated occurred in the Wenatchee Meadows in California, just 27 miles south of Mount Whitney, the highest point in the contiguous United States. Everything about the case was compelling. It was a multiple witness case, although not everyone in the party laid claim to having seen the thing. There were footprints left. Castings of the tracks were made, and sounds were heard. Briefly, this is what happened. Several men were hired out to build a footbridge over the Kern River. They were there several days. On August 4th, 1986, the weather was clear, cool, and a blue haze hung over the mountains. At about 8:45 p.m., a very loud screech was heard by all 5 witnesses. One of the bridge builders, Russell Pozovich, yelled to the crew foreman, "Get the gun," as he thought a mountain lion was approaching camp. A second and third screech was heard. By this time, Leonard Williams got out of his tent to investigate. As he looked to the area where the sounds came, he spotted the thing, exclaiming, "There it is! There it is!" This is a sketch of what Leonard Williams claims to have seen. He and the company along with him were certain that what they spied for 5 to 10 seconds was without question the legendary Bigfoot. It was described as being between 5 to 700 pounds, about 8 feet tall, massive, hunched over, bipedal, and a brisk walker with a lumbering gait. To Williams, the brief incident was, as he put it, bone-chilling. To Pozovich, he couldn't get over the loudness of the screeches, like a football stadium speaker, and foreman Clay Paulson said little, but hung tight to the gun. All 5 grown men in the camp were so utterly terrified by their brief 5 to 10 second encounter with the Sasquatch. They packed their flashlights, their shovels, and the gun, and hurried to the nearest ranger station to spend the night. Everything about the case is still impressive. I've since conducted on-site investigations of the area on 4 separate occasions. There's only one thing that bothers me about the case. And I'm not saying this to discredit myself or the witnesses, but to impress upon you that I don't withhold information. Before the sighting, Leonard Williams dreamt that a Sasquatch had approached his tent. This is the first time I've heard of something like this, And the only time, and the only thing I'm qualified to do is pass that information along. These are the people in their camp area who claim to have seen this thing. The man here with the dark sunglasses, Clayton Paulson, the foreman. The man with the black hat is perhaps the key witness, Russell Kozovich. The man sitting with the white hat in the back is the man who first said he saw this thing. His name is Leonard Williams. They had an 8-foot plywood board by 4 feet. I took it up to the sighting location about 600 meters away from their camp. There's a man standing off to the left side. They said this thing was the size of that plywood board as it moved from, as they put it, a lower clump of trees to a higher clump of trees. I think I need a little focus. Let's see, wait a minute. I got it. This is, as the thing walked, how it would have seen the camp on that night. This is plaster cast. It looks like it's about 13 5/8 inches long. Since been broken. It's not a very good quality cast, but apparently there were tracks there. Oh, I may as well get into this then. These are just general slides. This was done about 1978 by me. Perhaps a description of what a Sasquatch might look like. I begin. This is seen up in Northern California. This is a statue done by D. Colt near Garberville, California, off Highway 101. This is another one down the road. Perhaps a cheap imitation of what they have in Willow Creek, California. That's me standing by the side, by the way. I'm 5 feet 7 inches tall, so you get a reference as to how high that thing is. This is the Willow Creek statue done by the then zoology student Jim McLaren, who's no longer in this thing anymore. This is the backside of the Willow Creek statue, something that you've probably never seen. You probably don't even care to.
Say that again.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.